You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Welcome to the 602 Club, Trek FM's local watering hole. I am just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and unfortunately this week, Christy will not be able to be with us, not because she doesn't want to be, but, well, her Crohn's disease is getting her a little bit down, so she will not be able to be here, but she plans to be here next week. We're very excited to have that happen, but this week, to help me do this episode on the 602 Club as we talk about, well, I would say the king of all monsters is Brandi.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm just so glad that you decided to come on to talk about, Matthew Broderick's, most famous role.
Oh
here.
my gosh, I love this movie so much.
So good. I mean, I who knew that this would be such a winner? Right? And I mean, what could be better than back in the day and having those Taco Bell commercials with the Chihuahua and Godzilla? It was fantastic.
Oh, I totally had a cell phone exactly like he did in that movie.
I
did.
Awesome.
I didn't even know that antenna extended until
funny.
I saw that movie.
Oh, man. We're just kidding, folks. We're not actually going to be talking about one of the worst movies that I saw as a kid back in 1998. No, we're not going to be. Well, I wasn't a kid then. I was in college. But anyway, that's beside the point. We're actually going to be talking about Godzilla from 2014 from Legendary Pictures, directed by Gareth Edwards, who also is responsible for Rogue One. And so very excited to do that as we kind of kick off a little bit of a movie monster phase here on the 602 Club. Should be fun. We'll be talking about this, Kong Skull Island, and then getting back to Godzilla with King of Monsters, which is coming out here at the end of the month. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do that, just a quick word, of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you happen to be on Apple Podcasts, please do help us out. Give us a star rating review. We will thank you on the show. We'll read out what you said. Make sure wherever you get your podcast, though, you're subscribed to the 602 Club so you get it as soon as we drop it. You can find us on Twitter at Trek FM. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Trek FM. And then you can find our listeners-only discussion group on Facebook. It's called the Babel Conference. Now, if you type Babel into the search field on Facebook, you'll find us there. Or maybe you're on the website at Trek.fm, just kind of perusing all the podcasts we've got. And any of those show pages for the podcasts, there's a button that says discussion. If you hit that, that'll also let you into the Babel Conference. And then last but not least, don't hesitate to reach out to us anytime with an email at trek.fm/contact. Choose a show, choose the 602 Club, and that will come to Christy and I. Now, Brandi, I was really interested about this fact because I think, Godzilla predates us all. And so I was wondering kind of what your first experience with this King of Monsters was. And, was it some like love at first sight? Or did it take time to warm up?
Well, for me, Godzilla is a lot like Star Trek in that I don't remember a time before Godzilla. When I was a kid, we didn't have cable TV. And so we had like 4 channels from which to choose. And the UHF channel was the one that was always playing the weird dubbed Japanese movies. And I just ate that stuff up. And if there was Godzilla on the screen, I was in. I loved Godzilla so much. And I even watched the very not good cartoon version with the most annoying theme song maybe ever. Yeah. But I have in fact, I own several of the Godzilla movies myself, from going as far back from, I believe it was 1954. when the first
I
one?
think 1954 is the first time, because it's about 9 years after
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima.
And so I have some. I've like spanned the whole year. One of my absolute favorites, which is one of the most totally ridiculous one, is Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. So, but I have several, got quite a few, and love them.
It's funny because I was, like you, like very much aware of Godzilla. And, part of that was, many kids are big into dinosaurs as a kid. And, Godzilla is basically just a big dinosaur. And so for me, loved that. And that really led me, I saw bits and pieces of Godzilla movies here and there. But that actually made me, and I know everybody, you can laugh, but it made me very excited in 1998 when Godzilla was coming out. Because I was like, sweet, yes, so excited for this, and we're finally going to get a big CGI extravaganza where Godzilla will finally look real. And then the movie is just really bad. The Godzilla design, they decide to try and change Godzilla's design for some reason because, yes, we're going to do it better.
Let's make it look like a giant Gila monster.
It just, it's pretty awful. And it was so disappointing. It was one of the films that was one of the most disappointing for me in that, high school, college era, where it was just like, I can't imagine a film being that disappointing, but it was. The best part were the Taco Bell commercials. So with the Chihuahua.
Yeah.
Lizard. So, that kind of led me to, when this movie came out, to disregard it a little bit, because of that experience. And so for me, I didn't see this one until later on. I watched it at home and thoroughly enjoyed it. I guess spoiler alert, for the rest of the show. But no, I mean, this one, I think this one, just to say, it does everything the other one didn't. Like it respects the canon and everything. And so, that was my experience to see this for the first time. Did you see this one in the theater?
I did. And I saw it actually pretty early on because my knee-jerk reaction when I first heard that they were doing this was no. Do not mess this up again. You've already screwed it up once. Do not mess this up again. But then I heard that they were doing it in conjunction with, I believe is it Toho Pictures, that does all the Godzilla movies in Japan. And I thought, okay, maybe it'll be okay. And then I saw the first trailer and I'm like, okay, I have to see it. I have to. And, I also thoroughly enjoyed it. I might have cried a few times, as I am wont to do when I am enjoying something very much. And I cried at surprisingly strange places in the film, which we can talk about later.
Well, and I think one of the things that was so interesting about this too, and one of the reasons I didn't see it, the late 90s were the place where all of these disaster movies were coming out. Yes. And they're all awful, right? Mm-hmm. And part of my reticence to see this is that it felt kind of like that in the trailers. And so I was like, this is just going to be one of those, The Day After Tomorrow and all those kind of things. Yeah. And so I was very thankful, I think, that they didn't go in that direction. And, for them reintroducing the character, giving us this reintroduction, I thought that the smartest thing that they did was that they introduced the character into our history, so they tie it in with 1954, pretend as though it's real, so that then they're trying to kill this alpha predator on an island, and that's what all the nuclear bomb testing actually is. It's not about testing bombs, it's about trying to kill this thing. And I felt like such a smart idea to really try, and it felt like they were just trying to make it real. They were trying to make it fit within our universe, and I thought that was something that I really appreciated, because I felt like it gave weight to this in a way that helped me kind of accept, like you can put yourself, okay, this is a world, this is a universe where they exist, right? Just the same way we do, like, this is the superhero universe, So I just thought that was really, really smart as a way to reintroduce this character in a way that's not winking at the camera, basically. Like I felt like the 98 version was.
Yes, there was no winking. There was only, just the opening credits alone gives you that moment to understand what is about to happen. And using stock footage, and I'm sure that they made some footage that was shot recently look really old, and they did a really good job with that. I love the credits with all the redacted information. I just thought, yes.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, this is what I wanted. You are taking this seriously instead of, making fun of it. Because the original Godzilla was so serious. It was not, it was a metaphor for nuclear holocaust. And so to remove that element of it would have been a complete mistake. Luckily, Gareth Edwards had no intention of doing that. And because you got to have that same correlation between Godzilla and nuclear warfare. You just have to. Because Godzilla is there to fix the mistakes that we keep freaking making.
Yeah, and I thought that was something that was really good as well, is that obviously they kind of reference that, but they also use this. They have a couple of different themes that play throughout the movie that are slightly more modern, but they still play along with what we're talking about, and I think that was another really smart thing. And it was fascinating to me too, because they really, like you said at the beginning of the movie, does such a great job of setting everything up with the credits. I love movies that really use the credits. Watchmen is very good at that, about using the credits to tell an entire story of that first group of heroes. This is kind of telling that first story of Godzilla's appearance, and then it jumps to 1999 where we get those monarch scientists who find this underground lair of some kind of something. Like, we don't even know what it is. And they don't even really, the best part about this movie is they don't like show you right away. As we're introducing all these things, Gareth Edwards is really smart in that, and he even talked about this in the extras about, and he felt like so many movies of the time period where it's like they overload you, then they overload your senses by showing you everything all the time.
Yes.
And this was not a movie that was going to do that. And so even in 1999, we don't truly understand exactly what this is because we never actually see it. We only see that it's whatever it was has hatched and it's left. And then that story travels to Japan, where some of our main characters, we've got Joe Brody and his wife Sandra, who are played by just the wonderful Bryan Cranston and Juliette Binoche. They work at a nuclear plant there in Japan, and there are some tremors that are going off the radar, basically, just like off the charts. And in all of it, the plant ends up collapsing, and we get the feeling like it's this whatever it was, that it went from the Philippines to there pretty quickly. And it really sets off another chain reaction because it kind of introduces us to this main family who we're going to see through their eyes everything else that happens in the rest of the film, which is such a good introduction because the movie isn't so much about Godzilla. It's more about the impact that these massive creatures have on people that we're following. And so I thought that was the other smart thing, is this movie's not about Mutos or Godzilla. It's more about family and the impact that, and that's just, it's such a great idea. Otherwise, it is just kind of a monster movie, and, you know, who doesn't, to make us care is a really important thing. Otherwise, it's just a CGI fest, and that's boring.
Yeah, that is boring. And that was a conscious choice by Gareth Edwards. He was not going to throw everything at you visually. He wanted moments to breathe. He wanted us to get to know these characters. There's a lot of emotion going on in this film that you don't typically get in a monster movie. And I wouldn't actually classify this even as a monster movie. It's a movie with monsters in it, yeah. I also think that it was a very smart idea to not use a known Godzilla anti-hero or anti-kaiju, whatever Godzilla is going to be fighting. This was something we've never really seen before. And that works better because now you're like expecting something. Oh, it's going to be Mothra or something like that. Nope. It was something we've never seen before. Just a massive unidentified terrestrial organism that wasn't terrestrial for very long. But I appreciated that actually, because now I'm curious. I want to know how they're going to defeat this thing. And what abilities does it have? And what does it want? And where is it going? And we get to follow that mystery too. But it's about the people. That's the core of the story. It's about the people. It's about Serizawa. It's about Ford. It's about Elle. It's about all of these people have very important parts to play in this story and to connect us with this story. And that's the thing I love the most.
The thing that I really like, too, is that you start with such an emotional scene then.
Yes.
When you're at the plant and you get Cranston, you know, his character Joe having to sacrifice his wife and all those other people are his friends. Mm-hmm. So, and he has to sacrifice their lives. And as those doors close, so he can't even see through the window anymore, it's just such a heartbreaking scene. And on top of that, you know, the next person we see is his son grown up. So we realize that the impact that this has had has been one that's kind of broken a family apart, you know? And so I just really appreciated the fact that we start with a place that puts us in such an emotional state so that we are kind of, I don't know, part of me is just, might sound weird, but part of me is so much more interested than in where they're going to go as compared to, you know, when Godzilla shows up. You know, I think that's a really strong thing for me, is that in all of this reintroduction and bringing back these characters, right, I feel just as invested in, you know, these characters as much as I do monsters battling, which is great because they leave me wanting both, right? And I think that's the smart thing is this movie is walking that line to give us characterization that matters in the movie, but also to keep whetting our appetite throughout the film, waiting for the big monster mash, you know?
Oh, yeah. I think, I don't know if they understood how people were going to respond so strongly to Joe Brody. And so, but maybe they did. And that's why when he dies, you're just like, oh, hell no. It just rips your heart out. They just keep ripping your heart out every so often with this movie, which is, I'm not complaining about that, because if you are making me feel like you're ripping my heart out, then you are doing your job. You are connecting with me on an emotional level, which is not something blockbuster movies tend to do. And I loved that. I love Bryan Cranston anyway. I mean, who doesn't love Bryan Cranston? But I love the tiny moments too. Like when he and his wife are in the car and she's telling him that, you know, Ford made a sign for his birthday. And then he's talking to her. It's like, when we get there, you just don't even come up. You just take a team and go down and see what's going on. And, you know, they're talking, and then she says, "Happy birthday." And he's like, oh, what?
Yeah.
It's my birthday. And that's just one of those wonderful personal moments that just says so much about their relationship without us having to see their entire history. I love, and this movie is full of those little moments. I love it so much.
Yeah. Well, and all of this takes place in the introduction.
Yeah.
You know, to set up the rest of the movie. And, you know, I thought it was really interesting that to bring us kind of into the present, what we get is that, you know, Joe coming back from being on deployment, he is a Navy explosive specialist, and his dad, I mean, the night he gets home, and he's spending time with his wife and his kid, doesn't even get any loving, has to traipse off to to Japan to pick up his dad from the consulate, who's broken the quarantine zone where the plant had collapsed, has been turned into a quarantine zone. And that really starts us off on the whole rest of the movie, which, again, you know, I thought it was just very smart to you got this whole human connection, because then on top of that human connection, the other human connection is you've got Dr. Shiro and his partner, who have been following this thing that escaped from the Philippines. Then they follow it there, and we all end up at the same place where we realize, oh, this is some sort of weird chrysalis egg of something that we don't even know what it is just yet, which just such a great way to put all these characters together, and they don't even realize that they're together, which is so much fun.
Yeah, I love that too. Everything comes back to that power plant, and everybody ends up there because Ford does give in to his dad and go back because his dad makes a compelling argument. Joe does have facts on his side, which Ford just doesn't want to listen to because he's just written off his dad as crazy, which we know he's not. And so it's really hard to see Ford treat his dad that way because we know he's not crazy. We were there. I mean, we didn't see exactly what happened, but we know something is going on, and it wasn't a catastrophe with one of the reactors. And so he's just got this burning need to prove that he was right because he was the one who sent his wife down there. And he feels like he's got to know why she died. And that is fair. I mean, anyone would feel that way. So, but, and that whole thing leads us to the reactor, and now we got a big old gross-looking egg sitting in the middle of that big pit around all the reactors, and let the fun begin.
I think that is the thing that really connects the movie, because, you know, as much and as great as it is to have a really cool, you know, action movie with, you know, big monsters that are going to find each other, I think that the human side of this is really what makes things work. Mm-hmm. And part of that was, for the most part, I think the cast is really strong.
Yes.
And like you mentioned, you know, Bryan Cranston, I think his character Joe, we have a character that we really appreciate, we really like, you know, we already kind of gravitate towards as a person. And what's fascinating to me is he's not even in the movie very much, but he's so affected in the parts that he is. And when we lose him too, I think it does this thing where, and obviously they don't really play with this much, but it does make you think, okay, anybody could die. Mm-hmm. If we're going to kill Bryan Cranston, anybody's game here, which I thought was also a very smart move for them, because otherwise the rest of the movie you wouldn't be worried about anybody. But truly, the first time you see this movie, I do think you kind of worry about everyone, because you're like, oh, well, I mean, if you're going to kill the lead of the film, I guess you could really kill anybody at this point.
Oh, yeah. I felt like nobody was off limits, and so I had no idea if anyone that we've seen so far was going to make it to the end of the film, any of these main characters. And I like the not knowing. And also, just totally random, one thing I really appreciate is that no time Does anyone use the phrase once and for all? I hate that phrase so much. It is so overused in dramatic situations, and anytime somebody says that, it just takes me out of the reality. But you never hear that. You hear whatever it takes. And that is so much better than once and for all.
I think the thing that they did the best was to put probably the best actor in the film, the one that we are most connected to at the beginning. And again, I think the way that Cranston sells the emotional moments that he has really connect us to everything that's going to come before that. And it is a little bit sad, honestly, that he dies so quickly, because I kind of missed that throughout the rest of the movie in some ways. But I do think he sets up the rest of the film. And when he dies, in many ways, you know, you're making that switch from being a more emotionally driven film to the more of the action, which is great. But it's a great casting job. I thought that was really, really smart. And so I was interested too, because, you know, I'm not super familiar with Aaron Taylor Johnson, because he's been on things. You know, he was in he and Elizabeth Olsen were brother and sister the last time I'd really seen them on screen, and that was in Ultron, so it's a little awkward.
I actually ended up not finding it awkward. I thought they pulled it off well enough that I'm just like, no, I believe your brother and sister. I'm good with it.
Yeah, no, they do play brother and sister well. It was weird to go back and then watch them in this, because I saw the reverse.
Yeah, and it didn't bother me. I'm just like, I know. Because actually, this movie was the first time I ever saw Elizabeth Olsen. And
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And I was extremely impressed with her and thought, who is this chick? Had no idea she was of the Olsens. Though, you know, looking at her now.
I didn't know that till much later either.
Looking at her now, I'm like, how could I have not thought that? But I'm just like, she's really good. I mean, she is a really good actress.
Yeah, no, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson is good in the role, but when they apparently had offered the role to like Joseph Gordon-Levitt or Henry Cavill, I might have liked one of those above him, because I think they're better actors. But I think he does what he's asked to do well, and I think by that point I'm not as invested in him as a character so much as I am everything that's going on. So it doesn't pull away from the movie for me, the fact that he isn't like a standout, you know, like that, which is a really good thing.
Yeah, well, he's our avatar, really, for what's going on. And to be fair, he doesn't get any time to process anything that's happening.
It's true. That's very true.
No time whatsoever. It's like, Dad's dead. Hey, giant monster. Hey, we're putting you on a chopper to Hawaii. Get on this flight. Big monster attack. Okay, let's fight monsters now. Gotta find this lost kid's parents. And just, it's just...
Oh, and your family might die because they're headed towards your home.
Yeah, and you can't get to your home. It's just like one after the other, after the other, after the other. All these things. He doesn't have time to even stop and breathe. I think the most time he gets to stop and think about anything is when he's on that plane to skydive into the city. Which, by the way, shout out to that 2001 Space Odyssey music that they borrowed.
I think you're right. You know, one of the things that they do at that point is you're kind of flowing more as a point of view than necessarily as like a full-fledged character, maybe, and that's not really his fault. And what I thought was great is that, like, we were talking about Elizabeth Olsen, and I do think that she's really good in the movie, and honestly, she becomes the avatar for emotion then throughout the rest of the film, more so than Aaron Taylor Johnson. And I think she pulls that off because obviously, you know, she's worried about her son, she's worried about whether she's going to live, and she's worried about her husband and the rest of the people she's trying to help because she's a nurse. And so, like, she has so much going on. And I think I become actually much more invested in her as a character, which is great because I really like Elizabeth Olsen, and I think you know, I have enjoyed her obviously in the Marvel films, But I think here she gets some places to shine a little bit, mainly because she becomes our emotional key for most of the rest of the movie.
Yes.
And I think she does it well. Like they put it in good hands. So like Allstate.
Elizabeth Olsen is Allstate.
She's like a good neighbor.
No, that's State Farm.
Yeah.
Don't get those two mixed
I can't.
up.
I get them all confused. Yeah.
No,
Anyway.
She has so many great moments, like when they find, like they've been trying to call each other, they keep missing each other, and he finally gets in touch with her, by phone when she's at work. And, you know, she's just like, she's trying so hard to hold it together, and she's talking to him, and you know, he's trying to tell her, and she's like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you okay? And she's asking him if he's okay when she's not okay, because that is what you do. You have more concern for your partner than you're just like, I can handle myself. I need to know if you're okay. And I loved that moment, and I was feeling it. And that was one of the moments where I cried. I got all teary because I could just feel everything she was sending out. It was just, it's just, again, a small character moment, but for me, it spoke volumes.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I mean, I think, again, all that she gets to do emotionally really kind of brings us through the rest of the movie from the emotional standpoint, which is fantastic. You know, we want that. You know, you can't get a better person than Ken Watanabe.
Oh, I love Ken Watanabe.
To play anyone. And he is really good in this movie. And you know, his role is actually smaller than I thought it would be after like kind of seeing the trailers and stuff, that he was going to be in this and everything. But I really like that, you know, he's the person, the scientist who's kind of figured out the key to all of this, which is that this is necessary. Like, these beings are here for a reason. You know, it's not just random happenstance that there is an alpha predator to make sure that these kind of creatures are taken care of. And so the fact that he's so much on the side of Godzilla of saying, you need to just let them fight this out and he'll leave. Like, he's not here for us. He's here to set order right on our planet, which is just such a cool place to be. And it just creates a really interesting sense where, you know, many movies in Godzilla's past, he's either a villain or a hero. Here, he's not really either. He's just a part of the natural flow of our created order, right?
Yes.
You know, and I like that there is kind of a sense of created order we get from Dr. Yashiro, and that we need to let Godzilla do the job that he's here to do, because we can't do it, obviously. So even though he doesn't get a lot to do, I think it's Ken Watanabe, and he brings all the gravitas you need to that role.
Oh yeah, he absolutely does. And I love when they're actually showing forward the films of Godzilla and explaining what's been going on all of this time. And he actually says the name that they gave it, which is Gojira, which in Japanese pronunciation sounds Gojira. Not, the R isn't hard. It sounds more like an L. It's somewhere in between an R and an L. And so everybody hears that, but they're like, oh, Godzilla. It's like, yeah, that's typical American. That is absolutely typical American. So everybody else even though he continues to say Gojira, everybody else says Godzilla. And it just makes me laugh because that's so typical.
You know, it's interesting because this isn't on the outline, but, you know, in many ways, Godzilla represents the thing that we can't control and is out of our control and is kind of godlike.
Yes.
You know, and so there is that kind of almost metaphysical representation, so that his name, as we know it in English, Godzilla, king, you know, like god of monsters, has a real, you know, it has a real philosophical meaning to it in a movie like this. And I think that's something that's kind of smart about this film. They play with that actually thematically a little bit. And yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously We Americans, we just call things what we want to call them.
Yes.
Or what it sounds like to us.
No respect for the culture or pronunciation.
Yeah. I don't know if I could have pronounced that more than one time, but I think it's interesting because the movie is kind of filled with other people that I know, like Juliette Binoche,
Sally Hawkins,
and you've got Sally Hawkins and David Strathairn.
Oh, I love him.
And he's great. But I do think what's also fascinating about this as well is that their roles aren't very big, so they just kind of bring a persona to the role, so you kind of you automatically kind of feel who they are and where they are. They're not going to be given tons of characterization or anything. But I think, it's kind of one of those things that you do. It's like, why do you cast Russell Crowe in Man of Steel, right? He's only going to be on screen for maybe 10 minutes at most, but you want somebody to bring a presence,
yes.
That you immediately know who and what that person is just by who you've cast. And I think they do that with these characters. And it's one of the things that makes this movie really stand out to me, because they've cast people that I really like and appreciate, but I don't need them to have like the world's, best character arc or anything. They just really bring that character to life in a way that makes me pay attention when they're on screen. And that's important.
Yes, it is. And it's like a story. It's a story that we're watching, yes, but it's very realistic in that there are going to be people moving in and out of every story, especially in real life. You don't always have the same characters in every story every day. And this movie demonstrates that. These characters are still memorable, again, like what you said, because the actors bring a certain gravitas to it. But we're okay. We don't need to know everything about these characters because we know enough for them to fulfill their part of the story. And they're not shallow. They're not just, I'm just here to move the plot forward. They have a purpose, every single one of them. And I feel like nothing is wasted in the film.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. It's like all of these characters are there and they're important to the story, but there's nothing really extraneous here. Mm-hmm. I think they were able to find a way to hone the story, and create one where, this movie I think is like 2 hours and like 3 minutes long, yep. So it's not overly long. So they found a way to effectively and creatively tell the story in a way that everything fits together well, and you don't feel like you're running on a lot of tangents, which is really important in a movie like this, because you never want to, you don't want to have anybody in the audience get bored.
Yes.
And they never give you an opportunity ever to get bored in this movie, because the plot is always moving forward and the characters are always driving you forward with the story. And I think that's just a really smart thing. And a part of that comes from the fact that we're using the drama of the family and we're seeing things through their eyes. And then the other part of that is that I think, even in the thematic element, like this kind of idea of fighting nature, which I thought was really interesting, because the doctor says, the arrogance of man is thinking nature is in our control and not the other way around. And I really found this to ring so true, because in many ways we talk about, I think you've been on plenty of episodes where we've kind of talked about where the key to the villain was that they're basically trying to be God, and we're not supposed to be God, right? And we make ourselves gods, and we kind of like try to control everything around us. In this movie, in a funny way, puts humanity in perspective by showing us the Godzilla. And when you put us in perspective with him, it's easy to see who wins, who's really in control, right? And I really appreciated that, because I think it brings us back to kind of putting more of a right order of things, that we aren't really in control of everything in the universe. In fact, we're in control of very little in the universe, if anything.
So little.
And I just thought that was a really smart thing, because that plays into that kind of theme plays perfectly into the original themes of the original Godzilla, of dealing with the aftermath of, a nuclear holocaust after what people did to other people, right? So I think that theme of control and basically playing that kind of God, we see that here, and this movie truly puts us, like, one of the things I thought was so cool is that, and Gareth Edwards talked about this, is that almost every time you see one of the monsters, they're in perspective with a human being.
Yes.
So we understand the size of what we're dealing with.
Yes.
And again, it's all about perspective. And I thought that was really, really smart of him. Like, you can really tell that Gareth Edwards and the writers had put a lot of thought into what they wanted this movie to do and what they wanted it to say. And I think what it's saying here is something we really, truly need to hear. We're not in control of nature, and we need to stop trying to be in control of nature in the way we are and conform it to our will, because it's never going to do that. It's nature. It just is what it is created to be, which is not us in control of it.
Mm-hmm. And it's made very obvious at pretty much every turn of them trying to stop these Mutos. Because for all of our technology and all of our weapons and all of our knowledge, we can do nothing. Nothing will kill these things. Nothing! So, except, I don't know, top of the primordial food chain, anyone? Yes? So, Godzilla is the embodiment of basically nature. He's the god of nature. And he's like, okay, you guys were doing stupid stuff and you awoke this thing. Now I'm gonna take care of it. You're welcome. So yeah, he's just gonna do what he's gonna do. And that's all there is to it, because he has to balance the scales.
Yeah, I think, the idea of us trying to basically change nature, is what we kind of see happening here. And it changed the order of nature. Like, it's created this way, and we try to change it in a way that is not good. And it results in something like this happen. Like you said, you woke up the beast. Well, now you have to have the other beasts to come and fix it, And again, I think it helps us find a way to put ourselves in perspective and make sure that we kind of hopefully, think about our impact and what we do, our actions, how they play out, and all of those things. Because that's really the other thing that the movie's about. It's not just fighting nature, but it's also about the choices we make and the consequences they lead to, and then having to live with those consequences. And one of the consequences in this movie, luckily this doesn't happen in real life, but, we end up living with kaiju. So
yeah. Well, the stark reality of it is, in our own reality and not this movie reality, is that if nature wanted us off this planet, it could do it. It could make us extinct faster than we can possibly imagine. And I hope it doesn't come to that. I want to get to that Star Trek future. But that's the thing. We cannot fight nature. We think we can, but every time we try something like, say, splitting the atom, yes, there were good things that came of that, but there were so many horrible things that came from that and are still coming from that and may yet still come from that.
Like, just on top of that, there's a difference between trying to control something and being a good steward of something.
Exactly.
And I think, obviously, when you think Judeo-Christian values-wise, that's the first commandment in Scripture, is to take care of the planet, right? Mm-hmm. So, and to be a good steward of it. Not to dominate it, but to be a good steward of what's been given. And I think that there's a huge difference in that. And so that's kind of what I think this movie plays at a little bit as well. Are we really stewarding the planet we've been given, or are we are we not? And what happens when we don't? What are the consequences of that? And then there are massive consequences for, not doing that well, And so I think that's something that I really appreciate about movies like this, is they just kind of make you think about those things and again, put it in perspective. And those perspectives are so important for us to be able to think about because, I think we kind of live in a world that's lost all perspective on just about everything. Yep. Especially when it comes to science and nature, and trying to control it in ways that it could never be controlled, or change it in ways that we want it to fit to. And it's just, we'll pay the consequences for that one day. So yeah. Hopefully not with kaiju, but,
It's not my first choice.
Yeah.
Really not.
I don't know. I might want to... Who doesn't want to pet Godzilla? Good Godzilla.
Oh, I want to pet him. I want to get up close to his nostril, but then that could be dangerous if he inhales. Could go right up in there.
That's true.
Be sucked right into his nose.
Man, nothing like Godzilla bogies.
Oh, this is something I thought about as a child. That's not a new concept to me.
Well, so obviously in a movie like this, the monster fights are going to be very important. And, we kind of talked about how Edwards keeps Godzilla hidden for a long while, kind of doing silhouettes or only seeing it from the ground. And even the first time you really see the fight, it's on TV, so you're not really seeing the fight. What did you end up thinking about the battle that we finally end up getting there when we get to San Francisco and, he's going at it with these Mutos? Did it live up to your expectations that the film was kind of setting up throughout the whole thing?
It did, because, I don't need to have constant monster battles. That's not something that I'm into. I need a breather. And it was very interesting because he's fighting a war on two fronts at the moment, because he's got the male and the female Mutos, and that female is big. Oh, she's big. I know that they were like, oh, she's bigger. And then when you actually see her in comparison to the male, you're like, oh my goodness, like she's as big as Godzilla. And so watching that fight and watching the back and forth and the tactics that they use to try and bring him down, and This is one of my favorite moments in the movie, because Brody has just destroyed all of the eggs of the female, which were a lot. If those eggs had hatched,
yeah, that was a lot. That was creepy.
That was so wrong. It's like, okay, if those hatch, we're gone. We are gone. Humanity is dead. And he takes it upon himself to destroy her nest. And another thing, I really loved the sounds of these Mutos. They were just so weird and alien, and yet communicated everything you needed to know about them. And the sounds that she makes when she realizes her nest is on fire, it was just like, wow. And the sounds she makes when she's looking down and she sees her eggs are all dead. And this is just the sound of mourning. And I'm like, I almost feel bad for her for a second, except that she's, trying to destroy the world. And, then she hears Brody make a noise. And so she just, oh, you're the one. And right as she's about to eat him, I'm pretty sure, you see this blue glow. And I'm like, this is one of those moments when I got super emotional. Because of all the things I wanted to see, and this is not the official term for it, I just wanted to see that atomic fire breath. Just give me that atomic fire breath once, and I swear I'll love you forever. And so you see that, and you see it growing up, and I'm like, yes, and I'm just like crying in the theater. Because I wanted that so much, and they gave it to me! And it was as awesome as I had hoped and dreamed. Yeah, so.
Well, I mean, yeah, when he, grabs that last Muto and rips open its jaws and just breathes fire down its neck to its face comes off of its neck, it's pretty awesome. I think the thing that's so effective here is that when we were saying it before in the last segment, but I think it's so true. It's all about the way they show perspective with these fights. So, we know what skyscrapers in San Francisco size-wise feel like, right, with size. And so we get a real sense of the size of these creatures and their battle. But it just looks really good. I mean, the way that they have, they so smartly have this fight kind of happen in this haze and this darkness only lit by, the lights of the city and the fires that are going on. And it just creates the perfect atmosphere to have this type of battle. And I mean, just even the rest of the effects with Godzilla, when he first comes to San Francisco, and he's right there at the Golden Gate Bridge and all of that. And, then he breaks the Golden Gate Bridge and, or when he's like swimming and he like swims and these boats just kind of get like pushed out of the way. And I like all of it. It was so well done. They really put a lot of thought into everything here. And I think the most successful thing is that they realized that they needed to pay homage to Godzilla as a character, and they made him look as realistic as possible, but they still kept the feel of those original films. So yes, fully CGI, incredibly detailed, but the look of the character looks right. You almost feel like, okay, this is what he always looked like. This is what it was meant to be. And I think that's the smart thing that they really do here. And it just makes for, I mean, if you're going to do a disaster type movie, this is the way to go. So I really loved it.
Yeah, I actually really like the Golden Gate Bridge scene. I have been to San Francisco many times, and so I am familiar with its layout, walked across the Golden Gate Bridge, all of those things. And when, you see the mayor of the town saying everybody get, BART stations are shelters. And I'm like, I've been on the Bay Area Rapid Transit. That's, just all these things. Like, I've been there. But I love when he shows up at the Golden Gate Bridge and, he just comes out of the water and he actually prevents that busload of kids, on which is Ford's son, from being destroyed by ridiculous, stupid fire from the ocean. It's like, why would you open fire on a bridge that still has civilians on it? What is wrong with you? And so he inadvertently saves them, and then they're all attacking, and Godzilla is basically just like, what are you doing? I have a job to do. And then he's just finally like, screw this, and just walks through the bridge. It's just...
Yeah, it like pushes it
he's just like, forget you. I've got things to do. I don't have time for this. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's a great job.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think one of the things that they end up doing is they found a way to give characterization to the character of Godzilla.
Yes.
And they do it in a way that doesn't really anthropomorphize him, but it just makes him believable as a creature. And I think that was really, really smart. So, and of course, with the monster fight, you get that amazing halo jump. And I think, it's interesting because when you watch this movie and then you watch Rogue One, Gareth Edwards has a very strong sense of visual.
Yes.
He's a very visual director. And I think he was the perfect choice for this movie. He really created something, I think, that is stunning visually, but it wasn't just a visual feast. He allowed you to connect with the movie on a more human level, which is really what brings this up to the, a higher plane, which is really important because it could have just been a great monster mash, but instead it's really something that, it just feels better than that, which is, I mean, when you go into a movie like this, you don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Godzilla King of Monsters is going to be able to live up to this because I think they've set the bar pretty high when it comes to these kind of films. So really interested to see where that goes. But makes me wonder, what do you rate this, Brandi? Like, where does this rate for you, do you think?
Let's see. I would say that this, for me, you know, being having been a Godzilla fan all of my life and being so bitterly disappointed by the 90s version, this was everything I wanted in I wouldn't even say reboot so much as a reimagination, because they are giving props to what came before, as especially the origin of the character. So I don't feel like it's a full-on reboot, because they're basically saying, no, this is the same Godzilla. And so it was important to me. I love the movie. I own the movie. I have watched it several times. I always get goosebumps when that atomic fire breath starts, and I always cry at the end when Godzilla wakes up from his nap. And because I'm just like, oh, come on, you gotta wake up. You gotta wake up. You're gonna wake up. And I was just waiting for it. And then it happens.
He's just tired.
Yep.
He's just tired. He just had a huge battle. You know, you just need a little rest, a little nappy nap.
I mean, gosh, anyone would want to rest after that. He's got a lot of wounds. So.
And he earned it.
Totally earned it. So I would give this 5 out of 5 BART station shelters, because I think it still is one of my favorite Godzilla movies, and I have a lot of Godzilla movies. So
yeah, for me, rewatching this one, I liked it ever since I saw it, but it actually moved up a star for me. I think this is 4 out of 5. Halo jumps for me. It's a strong movie. It's really enjoyable. They do a good job of, like we talked about with the emotion, they give you some nice thematic elements to go along with it that don't just feel forced, but they feel very organic to the story. And they create a movie that does live up to what you want when it comes to just a monster fight. They give you that too. And I think all of those things together creates a movie that kind of exceeds what you would expect from this type of film. And that's really good. I think at most you expect going into a movie like this thinking, it'd probably be like a 2.5, maybe a 3, So I think the fact that it really finds a way to kind of raise the bar helps a lot. So yeah, for me, this is a really fun movie. I really enjoy it. And, I hope people will enjoy us kind of talking through some of the other ones that kind of flow in the continuity of this, because we've got Kong Skull Island, which is also a part of this same continuity, and then Godzilla King of Monsters, which is part of this continuity. And I think the last one they might be doing is Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah, Godzilla
maybe?
versus Kong is coming in 2020, I believe in March of 2020, last I heard.
So, yeah, that'll be fun to see too, especially since the Kong that they created is, like the biggest Kong ever.
So big.
Yeah, he's huge. So really glad, though, we got a chance to talk about this one. It really, if it's not a movie that you've seen, I do encourage, go rent it. You can find the Blu-ray for like $8 places. So it's worth checking out. I think you'll have a blast. Really appreciate our associate producers here through Patreon, Ken Tripp, Davis Grayson, Wyatt Millette, and Daniel Noah, for supporting the show and helping make sure that everything here on this Trek FM network keeps coming to you each and every week, plus the 602 Club. Now, this is a very big network. We've got a lot of shows coming out each and every week, and absolutely can't do it alone. So we really do ask you to give your support to the network, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/TrekFM. We have some great contribution levels that give you even extra perks, but honestly, every little bit helps. So again, that's patreon.com/TrekFM. Now, Brandi, people want to catch up with you, maybe talk a little kaiju talk. Where can people find you?
I'm always happy to talk about kaiju. I love me some kaiju. You can find me on Twitter at Brandywine12. You can find me often lurking in the Babel Conference, not as much as I would like, but sometimes. And you can hear me intermittently on the Twilight Zone podcast, which you can find at thetwilightzonepodcast.com. I will be on another episode before the new Twilight Zone season 1 ends. I will be on the 9th episode for that one. And come over to the Dark Corner podcast at darkcornerpodcast.com. And if you want to hear my views on absolutely everything else that I like. Kind of from a darker perspective, which I do with my fabulous husband of, 21 and a half years now. My husband, Dave. Shout out to you, Dave. And also shout out to Christy. I hope you feel better soon. I missed you on this podcast.
Yeah, I am really sorry that Christy couldn't be here because I know her and her husband are big fans of Godzilla. So it'll be fun to be able to have her on as we talk about Kong Skull Island, and then, of course, talk about Godzilla King of Monsters coming up as well. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd under the name MattRushing02. I'm here on the network doing The Orb with Chris Jones, talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You can also find me over on the Nerd Party Network doing two shows. One is called Outpost, and I do that with Dre Kaufman. We talk about Harry Potter each and every week, one chapter at a time. You can also find me over there doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, talking about Star Wars each and every week. And then last but not least, you can find me over doing Cinema Stories with my good friend Courtney, and that's where we talk about films, but through the lens of faith. Now, we want to say thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and y'all come back now, you hear?